So we're going to have Kristen Oliver from Walmart, Rich Floersch from McDonald's, Suri Eberly from Coca-Cola, and Liz Gottung from Kimberly-Clark, all senior HR executives at their respective organizations. And as best as I can figure, across those 4 companies, they've got about 4.5 million employees across the globe. And rough calculation, that means they probably have somewhere between 300,000 and 600,000, at least, millennials that are currently employees in their organizations. So hopefully a lot of things that we can learn from the different folks that are here, and let me invite them on the stage with us. So Kristen, Liz, Rich, and Suri. Now, I could do full introductions of everybody here, but to be honest, that would probably take us to about 1:30 or 2 o'clock in the afternoon. It's probably not the best use of our time. What I'd rather do is really just dive into the different questions that we've got from folks. Let me just grab this. Thank you.
You want some drink?
And I see we've got some Coca-Cola on the stage, so thank you, Suri.
French fries.
They got cold.
I've clearly dropped the ball here. But wanted to really just dive in with some of the questions. As I do that, I'm going to have a first round of questions, but one of the things that Nadir was mentioning is that the more interactive, the more connected that people can feel, the more effective the conversation tends to be. So as I was mentioning earlier, would love for folks to tweet in questions to Brooke, or if you do have questions in the room, absolutely come down, and we want to give everyone here the opportunity to ask the 4 guests that we've got on stage some of the different questions. Sri, if you don't mind, starting with you here.
Okay.
One of the things that we've been talking about through the years is just communication with millennial employees. How do you engage them from a communication perspective? And would love to hear from the Coca-Cola experience. When this generation first started coming in the workforce, what were some of the lessons that you learned, maybe the good, the bad, the ugly, and then how have you taken some of those lessons and transitioned to kind of what you do today?
Okay. Hello, everyone. Thank you for coming in to listen. We've actually had a great journey on this, and I'll tell you one thing that just flat out fell on its face, and it was one of mine. And so we have town halls that are quite common. We have a global audience. So in particular, I'll give you an example for my function, because some of you in the audience are smiling. We would have one-way global town halls where you could join by WebEx or telephone, but it was always a one-way delivery. And the first one went pretty well, second one pretty well. And then we noticed that no one would show up in the auditorium, and people were actually at their desks. And so what the feedback is that our younger generation of employees actually want two-way, and that's why Barrett's here to get the questions from Twitter. And what we realized is that we had to introduce a new way and a different way of communication. So we actually do a number of things that are quite different. So if we do have a town hall, we actually sometimes don't do it. We do it virtual, like a webcast. And we take questions through what we call chatter. Some of you in your organizations or small businesses have chatter. And we have content, but yet it's really more about a dialogue. So we've gotten away from formal presentations. Whoever's presenting information, it's a dialogue, and then people actually put chatter questions up on the screen, and it's real-time answer the question. And if you don't know the answer, you don't know the answer, and you say so. But we have learned that having two-way interchange and dialogue that's authentic, that's real time, whether it be virtual through the camera, because we are connected in over 200 countries around the world, but that we needed to have a different way for employees to communicate with us. So we went from an auditorium that started to become very empty to a completely different way. The other way that we've done this is we shoot YouTube videos. And so when I travel and when a lot of our leaders travel in the market, I was, Ed, where was I? I was in Costa Rica, Poland, London, and Switzerland. And we actually would go out into the market so that our associates all around the world would actually see what Poland looks like, talk to the general manager, and these were no more than 1.5 to 2 minutes of a video. And we would post them, upload them that night, and they would go all around the world. And it was viral. It was very much like watching YouTube. And it was very much an educational tool and just a snippet of information so people could look at it and go, oh, that's cool, and get back to work. So we found different mediums of communicating, shorter, to the point, more authentic, more direct, more two-way, and kind of the PowerPoint dinosaur approach is slowly going away. So for those of you that like PowerPoint, I like PowerPoint, but we really are walking away from it in terms of trying to have a dialogue and an exchange, even in our business plan presentations.
Yeah. Wow. Rich, let me turn to you. As you think about the different generational employees that you've got across McDonald's, and again, large-scale global, what are some of the things just from an engagement perspective that you found that have been the most effective with McDonald's as well? And somewhere to show you, what is the lesson learned, and then what are you doing differently now from those lessons learned?
It's great to be here. Thanks, Brian. And instead of me trying to hypothesize around this, given that I'm a boomer, I decided to go out and actually survey a number of our people within our Young Professionals Network, which would be a great representation of our millennials. And the first thing that I think is interesting about that is within 2 or 3 days, I got over 100 responses back. So this notion of wanting to provide, as you said, Suri, input, interaction, two-way, was really very illustrative during this thing. One thing, and I read every single one of their write-in comments, they are smarter, and I'll contrast this with the boomers. I do feel a little bit bad for the Gen Xers because, they kind of get lost in a lot of the conversations here.
We're the older brother, older sister, I guess.
Right, yeah. Right. But they are so much more savvy about development than the boomers. They think about development more from the standpoint of job challenge and how they own their own career and how they seek out mentors than any of the people that I remember growing up with when I started with Kraft or McDonald's. So how do we make sure that we provide we do online mentoring now, so people can pick people within the organization that they want to be mentors with based on their backgrounds, and then they have a conversation, they see if so. It's done in a very formal but informal sense, and that's been very successful. It is less about paying your dues. McDonald's is a company that has people that have been around for 30, 40 years. That kind of pay your dues philosophy has to be revisited. We're looking at ways we can accelerate people through the organization and career pathing. And then we leverage a lot now this notion of we're 80% franchised, which means that we've got 80% of our restaurants owned by owner-operators, and there's a great message there about people wanting to become entrepreneurs. And we've got thousands of people that started out in the restaurants and are now owning their own restaurants. So that's a very strong message, I think, to people starting out within our organization. And then the only other thing I would say is that we've really looked at this area of being able to have a much stronger sense of purpose as an organization. I think in the past we were so much more about you want to be with a winning company, you want to be with a successful company, but I think nowadays it is so much more about having a company that you work for that has a strong purpose. Our work with Ronald McDonald House Charities, our work with energy conservation and sustainable fisheries and things really resonate with our employees. So we're moving much stronger in that area, Brian.
Great, thanks. Liz, we'd like to turn to you for a question. One of the things that we hear a lot, and Rich was alluding to as well, is kind of the need to be challenged, kind of get that next thing. And when you look at some of the data, what we hear and what you see within the survey data is that millennials, as they're thinking about a career and this development need and this acceleration, is they, from a time horizon perspective, kind of tend to think about things as 2 years, that what's going to happen in the next 2 years in a relatively short period of time. How, as a company, do you meet the needs and desires of the mobility that millennials want, but at the same time run an organization? Because you can't have people changing jobs all the time. But how do you manage that within Kimberly-Clark?
Well, I think that the way we're trying to look at this, and we're a 140-year-old company, so this change doesn't come very easily. This pay your dues sort of concept that you talked about, Rich, where too often we give someone 1 year of experience 10 times. So we're trying to reinvent the way we think about experience, paying dues, delivering results, learning what you need to learn. So we're trying to build that into everything that we do. I think the other thing is to think about why people think about this in 2-year increments, and the only way to generate growth, career growth, is to generate growth for everyone. So if you're not a high-growth company, and we're not, and you're not have a high turnover, which fortunately we don't, you have to create movement. So everyone's got to move to provide opportunities for millennials to move. So a couple of the other things that we've tried, some worked, some haven't, but we try to get our top talent millennials, the people who are really coming in and showing that they want to succeed, that they want to drive some results and so forth, we give them access to leaders and decision makers. So for example, a year ago we brought 15 folks from around the world together to redesign our performance management system. And as an HR professional, it was pretty tough to let go of that, but as it happened, 2/3 of the group were millennials, and they came up with a great solution for us, which we then implemented. I think the key is, you ask us to help, you better be willing to try it. So we do that. We have something called job swaps, where we swap people for 3 months at a time. And we take them across borders, we take them across functions. That gets millennials really energized. We do a lot of reverse mentoring. So we have millennials mentoring up and with decision makers and leaders. And I think we have found that that's a very effective way to really engage millennials. The other thing that we're doing is we have employee networks, as Rich talked about, and we give them budgets and we give them quite a bit of authority to manage their programming. And so we take the oversight and say, here's your budget, here's your mission, you know, go for it. So these folks are planning events, they're managing big budgets, they're engaging the whole organization, not just their affinity group. And that's a way to build leadership skills, you know, and also to get people exposed to other parts of the organization. So the other thing that we're doing is we have some internal crowdsourcing where we go out and ask people questions. And currently we're working on what will we be when we're 150 years old? And we want the millennials to tell us what their dream is. And I think in closing, the thing you have to do, I think, with millennials and with anybody is to ask them, it's mass customization. What does success look like for you? What is your dream for your career? And then how can we help you get there?
Gotcha. So some fans there. Chris, let me turn to you with Walmart. You know, a couple of folks on the panel have alluded to this already. I know Suri and Coca-Cola has done a lot of work on veterans issues, for example, Rich with Ronald McDonald's House and so on. As you think about the importance of kind of corporate social responsibility, how has that been evolving at Walmart, and how much of that is kind of organically driven by the millennials in the organization? How much is driven by external factors? How is that playing out within Walmart?
We've been on this journey for quite some time, starting probably most notably with our sustainability initiatives, which started several years ago. But even more basically, I've been at Walmart 9 years, and in that time period, we really coalesced around a message about what our value proposition is, and that is the saving people money so they can live better. In the time that I spent in our international organization, you see how this matters significantly in countries like India and China and Brazil. You can feel it, it's tangible in the things that we do there. We have a group of schools that we call social retail schools, where we go into Brazil and India in particular and teach them basic skills, in Brazil more basically, and in India about formal retail, because India doesn't really have a formal retail market. But as we think about the next generation of leaders, we know this is significant to them. And so we've announced recent initiatives like the women's economic empowerment work that we're doing with trying to source more from women-owned suppliers and do training. And then the most recent things that we've talked about is our U.S. manufacturing commitment and our veterans commitment, like Coca-Cola. And those have gotten us a great leverage within the organization, lots of excitement around these kinds of programs from all generations, frankly. But in terms of recruiting, it's something that a lot of people who are interested in a career with Walmart care about and talk to us about. So as we leverage purpose that's organically true in Walmart, we found that it really resonates with the next generation, especially if they have an opportunity to work on it when they come. And so that's something that's been really important, in particular with sustainability, that's kind of a grassroots movement, that everybody has a way that they can access that, either personally or professionally.
Yeah. It's interesting, similar to what Liz was mentioning around, it's not just enough to ask. When they answer, you have to be ready to work with the answer.
That's right.
That's there.
Just an ad. Actually, all of us are partners in a project in Brazil that you referenced it, but it's an initiative going into the favelas or the slums, which a number of us have been a partner to go in and work with the communities, high school students who will not have the opportunity to go on to college. And we've partnered together to teach basics of retailing. And so we are all partners of employment as soon as they graduate. So it's given sustainability to keep the kids off the street and getting in trouble. It gives them employability. So a number of us on the stage and some other partners have been working together in countries like Brazil to help communities be sustainable. And the High School Student Project is one where we've all been working together for the better good of the community. And we hope to replicate this across different parts of the world. So we're all partners, and we do a lot of work together in corporate social responsibility as well as the things we do around people. So it's a good story, and some of you in the audience have actually seen it. It's very humbling because there's a great need to provide employability, and we have an opportunity to make a difference.
Yeah. Let me actually open up the conversation a little bit. Barrett, I know there's been a couple questions that have come in. If you want to share one or two of them there.
Absolutely. So we talked a little bit about mentoring and the relation between millennials and older workers in the workplace. And one question that came in from Danielle Elkins was, how can we convince our more senior colleagues that our motivation is not to take their jobs, but rather to prepare for our own future? And further than that is, how can we encourage our more senior colleagues to think differently and to really innovate alongside us so that it's not an either or millennials or senior colleagues, but both and?
And Barrett is actually a millennial, a global shaper that Coca-Cola is sponsoring. He is one of my mentors, and he's actually been very kind to me. I've got one on the West Coast that's brutal. And actually, our senior leaders have gone through a journey, and I just looked at a stat this morning, and for Coca-Cola, almost 60% of our hiring the last year has been millennials. And for us, where we have traditionally been more of a mid-career level hiring organization around the world, this is astounding. So one of the things that we've done is Coke joined an organization through the World Economic Forum called Global Shapers. And it's about 300 or so entrepreneurs and young things, I call them, that work around the world. So we actually use them in our businesses around the world to coach us. And the most recent example is we had a senior leadership meeting in Atlanta around strategic planning for the next 3 to 5 years. Barrett was there, and we had a group of global shapers come in and actually help craft the strategy for the next 3 to 5 years of the company. It was very cool. We also have, most of our senior leaders have a reverse mentor on our leadership team, and these would be people that live all over the world. So we've actually instituted that as kind of a core competency of our learning as leaders, because one of the things that we found, you cannot make assumptions about what's right and what's in your head. And Barrett's really educated me on a lot of things, but it really takes the time. You have to take the time to listen and want to adjust, and when people give you feedback, you have to do things with it. So our senior leaders are really trying to listen and be very thoughtful about Gen X as well as baby boomers as well as millennials. But since we have not had as many in the workplace, we recognize that we don't know what we don't know, and we cannot make assumptions about the way of the world is according to the way we always used to do things. So Barrett's been really great, as well as others, to help us listen differently, because it's a direct connection to our consumers, it's a direct connection to our customers, and I think it also requires a little bit of humility and humbleness to say we don't know it all and we don't have all the answers. So we have found that these groups, if you invite them in, they want to solve problems, they're co-creating. We've got them in a number of our innovation projects, but we're just finding that by asking the question and really focusing on listening and being thoughtful, that we are making changes that we needed to change. So thank you, Barrett, and thanks to those who've been giving us that feedback. But you have to want to listen.
Rich?
Yeah, we actually redesigned our accelerated development programs, which a lot of our millennials and Gen Xers go through, to make sure that there's not just 100% high potentials, but we sprinkle it in with some folks who actually have some fair amount of experience with the company, so that they can become almost teachers as well during the cohort sessions. So it's a great signal for us in terms of being able to say, hey, your input is valued. They're on kind of common ground when they're in that program together. It's great recognition for them. The other thing we found in our restaurants was that if you have a restaurant where you have a few seniors or boomers, along with a number of not even below millennials now, right, our 15 or 16-year-olds, that can be a higher performing restaurant because the younger people actually look up to the seniors in a way that maybe they wouldn't to their restaurant manager for advice, almost like an uncle or an aunt. So we've actually communicated that around the world in terms of our restaurant composition to make sure that they think about having a good representation of seniors and boomers in their restaurants, because that dynamic really does seem to work pretty well. We've also found that when we have 10 or 12 seniors, the productivity goes down. So there's a sweet spot in there somewhere. But it's neat to see that dynamic actually come through.
It almost strikes me as that we talk a lot about how to attract, engage, manage, develop millennials, but it's in some ways it's a question which is bigger than that, which is how do you manage a multi-generational workforce where part of it happens to be millennial and there's different pieces there. How do you get the learnings that are occurring, the interactions, the different expertise that different generations bring because of experience, situation, whatever it might be. That's there. Christian and Liz, I'm not sure if you've got a...
Sure. What we call that, and I heard Nadira make reference to it, or maybe one of you also, is customization. And coming from the legal department, I understand that we've been on a journey for a long time towards sort of homogenization in our workforce. And we felt like, I think, treating everyone the same is treating them equally. And as we've learned, and this generation in particular has pushed us to think about a more customized approach is what's necessary. And what's good for the millennial generation is good for all generations. And the trick is to have a wide enough variety of offerings and opportunities that there's something for everyone, that there's something that appeals to everyone. So we've been using data, frankly, to tell us what our big population, which is in our stores, so about 1.2 of our 1.4 million associates in Walmart US are in the stores, and that's the population that's the most remote from our corporate headquarters, and that we really try to understand what they're looking for, and it's led us to some changes in terms of what we offer. And I think that we are going to, in the home office, we've done some things in particular with merchants that have caused a differentiation and much higher levels of retention and engagement there. But our company is younger than many of yours. So we're just in our 51st year, and we're a pretty accessible company. So if you work in our corporate office in Arkansas, you'll see the CEO strolling around, and you can walk into his office, and you have incredible access to senior leaders. And so we have a connection already between our senior leadership and the most junior people in our organization, and that has led us to get the kind of input we need to create more customized offerings.
But let me turn to you again.
Here from Lindsay Hardigree, and she says, how do corporate giants encourage their Generation Y employees to get involved with community through nonprofit service and giving? And maybe further, so how does community engagement drive engagement in the workplace, and how do you encourage that amongst your employees?
Well, at Kimberly-Clark, being part of the community is part of our values, and that's well into our 141st year. It's been that way. I've been with the company 32 years, and it's no different today than it was when I started, which is we really care about the communities that we work in and the consumers that we sell to. So part of that legacy is the idea of community partnerships. So we have plants all over the world. We have about over 140 manufacturing facilities. Every plant facility manager has a budget to do community good works, community things with education, whether it's sustainability, whether it's a charitable thing. We have a huge foundation, that really takes 5% of our profits every year and plows it back largely into the communities where we live and work, but elsewhere around the globe. We have a community partners program where if you volunteer hours at any nonprofit at all, Kimberly-Clark will make a financial donation. We have corporate matching programs. But more than that, we really encourage people to be very active in their local community. We give them time off. We encourage them to take leadership roles on boards of nonprofits. And we often that's a huge story for us from a recruiting standpoint. It's a well-known part of our brand, and I think it is a competitive advantage when we are recruiting millennials in particular.
Rich.
Yeah, one thing for those looking to engage on it, we work with this company called Volunteer Match, which is a great way. It's an online tool. It's a nonprofit organization that'll come in and help you. It's an online tool which people can scroll down based on their area of interest, their zip code, and they could find 5 or 6 nonprofit organizations and they could do the scheduling all online. And the other thing that we found was there's a great advantage of having departments and teams do it together. So they'll go off for a day or two and work together as a team, and that really brings the team dynamics, I think, in a very positive way.
It strikes me as one of the things that Nadir is referencing was the ability to do it as a community.
Yes.
So when you're not just creating volunteer opportunities for individuals to go and do a thing, but for a department, a unit,
Right.
whatever it might be, it helps build that community in a very natural way
Yes.
around different things.
Yep.
Yeah, I wouldn't add any more other than to say this is very vibrant in all of the communities that we serve, and we use it as team building. So our team went to the Atlanta Botanical Gardens, and I learned how to muck a pond. Okay, raise your hand if you know how to muck a pond. Does anyone know what that is? Yeah. I didn't either, and I should have asked more questions. But you basically put on hip waders and you go into a pond and you dredge it of all the sludge that's in there and anything else that's gotten in there. But it hadn't been done in, I think...
Is this one of the YouTube videos that you created? Is
Yeah.
you doing that?
Yeah. And it was, I think it hadn't been done in about 8 years. But we had a group of us that fell in the mud and got covered in mud from head to toe. But the point being is that we're using it to engage. And the research has shown us that millennials coming out of university, 3/4 of you will make decisions on a company based on our efforts around being a partner in the community. Some people call it CSR, but everywhere in the world that we serve, we actually have to be seen as part of the community to be successful. So we have a number of things. I know Rich has Ronald McDonald House, which I've been on the advisory board. Many of us serve on boards. Many of us give back to the community. Our employees do. We give time off. We have a 5x20 program around the world for women's economic empowerment. Walmart has a similar program where we're initiating 5 million women over the next 10 years to become women entrepreneurs in some fashion and form. The Brazil project that we talked about is one of those. So it gives great opportunity to have passion and purpose. And I think what people like Barrett have told me, and I'm learning from many of you, is that it's not enough just to come into the workplace and just come in and do the job. You actually have to connect to something that really drives you and makes you smile and makes you really proud of your company. So we're 127 years strong, and I think community service and giving back to those local communities, it's always been a hallmark of what we do, but we must continue to do it because it links passion and purpose, and I do think it engages what we call hearts and mind. We can't connect just here in the head. We actually have to connect with your heart to make you give the best self that you have in the workplace. So I love it when we do it, and it's a part of, I do it every weekend actually myself personally. So it's something that our company is very dedicated to.
Let me turn it over to folks in the room. Any questions from the people that we've got? Yeah. Yeah, thank you.
You know he's going to work, huh?
Yeah, Barrett, we didn't know you were going to have to work.
Thank you so much. I think it's a really insightful conversation. My name is Anita Vadavata. I'm with a company called Cavella, which is a collaborative growth company. My question really is about, I constantly hear this conversation about this division of age differentiation in a company or an organization or a community where people are segregated based on your millennials, you have these baby boomers, you have these titles. But from a talent context, there's no difference. Everyone's talented. It's like they bring a different, talent to the table. So how do companies and communities and governments engage in truly having the conversation as to how do you engage talent? It really doesn't matter because these days you have 12-year-olds who are actually entering PhD programs. Age is no longer, even a requirement. So, and there's also 60-year-old men and women who are going and creating brand new companies, cutting-edge, innovations. So how do you, in that sense, really engage talent and take away the age component from that? And I would love to hear your thoughts on that.
Yeah. It's interesting, when I asked that specific question about what do you think is different with your generation when I surveyed the young professional networks versus others, they said, don't go that far to think that there are so many big differences, because really when it comes down to it, they still want, the first thing that they said was, we want to be recognized for great work. And it doesn't have to be anything elaborate. All it could be was just a simple thank you. So, this cuts across all generations. A boss who cares is what they said. They said challenging work, work-life integration, opportunity to give back, and development opportunities that the company supports. So those are all things that I think if you do all those things well, you're going to cut across all these generations and connect. You know, there are nuances, I think, as you know, you dive into it, but these are basic foundational things that I don't think change depending upon whether or not it's a 15-year-old or a 65-year-old. So,
And I didn't get to pronounce your first name again. And okay, thank you. I actually think it's about the work. And so if you take age out of it, we have a concept that we're now practicing with. We're still baby steps into it. It's called the talent cloud. And there are external talent clouds and internal. And if those of you in the audience, it was called what rabbit? Task rabbit? Yeah, the people, I love that concept. Where you actually post. We have assignments that could be 1 week, 2 weeks, 1 month, 2 months. That we have a need on an accelerator innovation project, and we need certain skills and expertise. And so we're actually not looking at it driven by age or experience. It's just who's got the experience and who can we match up to actually do this work and to probably step their toe in this area of innovation that hasn't before. So we're actually designing a completely new way to use people's experiences to drive innovation in a different way. But what we've been able to do is put it in little small bites so that people can participate because of whatever they bring to the table. They get to experience the work, and then they come back out of it, and then they can say, ooh, if there's a good full-time opportunity that might be a 2-year assignment, I might want to put my name in there. So we've actually tried to make it more about the work and then look at people's capabilities and skills of what they bring to say what could they add, and then design roles and jobs in a way that they can be project-based or they can dip in for a small period of time, dip out. We're also experiencing with that externally as well, and it's a great way to think about the work differently and not get hung up on if you're this generation or this generation, you know, is this really relevant for you? So going to the work and being creative around how we do the work and giving people the exchange of experiential learning, I think for us has probably been the most effective thing that we've done over the last year.
Other folks in the room?
We've got a lot more on Twitter if we want to keep going there. People in the room via Twitter.
Yeah.
But
there's one behind you.
Right behind you,
Right.
kind of 2 rows back.
Hi, my name is Dante with the Atlanta Music Project. Do the recent fast food strikes from the employees, do you think that affects, if at all, the perception that millennials might have about coming to work for your companies?
I didn't hear that.
Let me expand that question a little bit. How do you think about managing the external pressures that are often completely outside of the control of your company, that's driven by all sorts of socio-political factors? So you think about like the 99%, 1% from a year or two ago. You think about all sorts of different things. How do you help kind of manage the external communication, the external influence within the organization to accept that part of it's true, part of it might not be, but how do you think about the internal, external communication? And let's start with Walmart.
Your question was about strikes, and he was asking about strikes and how that impacts us. You know, what it's caused us to do is really get a lot clearer on what it is that we offer. Because we know, and when you work for Walmart, you feel the benefit of being at the company, but we always don't do a good job of telling our story externally. And so what it has caused us to do is coalesce around what we think is the real true opportunity of coming to Walmart. And we have a wide range of jobs. We were talking about this morning. We have entry-level jobs. We have jobs where your job is to go get shopping carts in the parking lot and bring them in. That's a cart pusher. That's an entry-level job, and sometimes it makes minimum wage. But what's the true benefit of working at Walmart is you use that job to get your foot in the door. Regardless of your skills, we'll hire people who do not have their high school diploma. So you use the job to get your foot in the door, and you take advantage of the opportunities once you have gotten in the door to grow into a job, and you can do it in about 7 years to be a store manager making $150,000 or $200,000 a year, or to come to our home office. And the wide breadth of jobs that we offer is not well known. And so what it's caused us to do is we look at, and we always think about what we're paying and what our benefit package is, but the opportunity story is the one that's really the differentiator, and we need to do a better job of talking about that and also making that tangible for all of our workforce. So that's what's caused us to do.
Yeah, you know, just to build on what Kristen said, This is an issue. You occupy Wall Street, and now you've got the strikes. There's obviously something here from a social inequality standpoint that people are very upset about, and I think part of it has to do with the unemployment rate being relatively high versus where it was 5-6 years ago. So I do think that we need to be extremely sensitive to the fact that there is concerns out there about people's feeling about the future. And I think, to what Kristen said, we need to do a much better job of being able to talk about these entry-level jobs and what they lead to, because in our organization, I know Nadira talked about UPS, they have a similar philosophy of promote from within. We've got almost half of our top executives started out as hourly employees, and there just aren't that many companies that you can start at and feel like you can make that. Our commitment to training and development is so strong that you can come in with really gain some life skills in addition to move up this organization. Then you have the entrepreneurial route as well. So, but I mean, there's an issue there that
it's not an issue that's going to go away.
Right.
And as you think about what's happened with the middle class in the U.S. and those jobs, those manufacturing jobs that were for so long the way that you could get to a middle class job, and as those have disappeared, more pressure is being put on McDonald's and Walmart and places like that to provide that kind of income. And 15 years ago, our jobs were held by part-timers and students and retirees, and now we have people trying to support their families on those entry-level jobs, and that's where the pressure is, and this is an issue that our industry is going to have to face and deal with, and in part, that's why we've been focused on bringing manufacturing jobs back to the U.S., because we think that's one solution.
Let me go to one question on Twitter, and then there's a couple folks over here.
Great. So we had two related questions here, one from Rachel Tobin and one from Mary Rose. And the essence here is, what happens if we don't give millennials special treatment? And we often think that we're right and that we deserve special treatment. And so if that's not the case, what are your companies doing to encourage millennials to be open to feedback and to be open to the fact that maybe you don't know everything about the workplace and we might be able to help you out there?
Well, I have 3 millennial daughters, and so I know exactly what you're talking about. I think that when you walk into our company, and I think all of our companies, the idea of feedback is just part of the culture. So whether you want it or not, you're going to get it. It needs to be balanced. We want to try to make sure that leaders in particular understand that not just millennials, but everybody has a different way of receiving feedback. And you have got, as a leader, you've got to have adaptable, agile leaders that can moderate their approach depending on who they're talking to, but still give balanced, focused feedback and recognition. And so I think the other thing that we try to do is offer peer evaluations. And oftentimes that coaching from a peer is taken much better. It could be the exact same message, but we really try to get a lot of peers involved. The other thing that we try to do, and sometimes this is not fun and certainly not comfortable, is put our millennials into really uncomfortable spots. Throw them in the deep end, and oftentimes they come back out saying, maybe I have something to learn after all. And sometimes they succeed beyond everyone's expectations, even their own. So that's some of the ways that we're dealing with it.
Yeah. I think, as part of this question around feedback and those types of things, there's also a theme there around just transparency, which is how do you create more transparency for different generations in the workforce about what's going on with a company. And Rich, I'm not sure if you want to comment on that or kind of the...
I would just say that, my experience has not been that millennials do not seek out feedback. I mean, to me, they're actually seek out feedback in a much more constructive way than what I remember a lot of my colleagues or even myself did when I was growing up in Kraft or McDonald's. So I think because of a lot of their self-expression occurs in many different ways, I think they're a lot more comfortable getting feedback, and they actually kind of cut to the chase. What is it that you need me to do differently so that I could be more effective at work and be more successful at this company? Just tell me what it is, and then I'll work on it. Yeah. There's little or no defensiveness around those kind of conversations, at least I've found.
Yeah. And the only thing I would add to that is I was writing with a merchandiser, like an entry-level salesperson, still getting his college degree, and we had a long conversation about his work and his contribution. And part of my observation was sometimes you don't know what good actually looks like until someone teaches you. And for those of us, how many of you had a job in high school or in college? Raise your hand. Yeah, many. And it took me back to the day, I started working when I was 13, but I actually had people who helped show me the ropes of what good looked like. Because at that time, I didn't have a clue. I worked in a restaurant. It wasn't a McDonald's. We didn't we didn't get a McDonald's until I was in college, and we didn't get a Walmart till I guess I was way out of college. And still today, I can't go to a Walmart unless I wear lipstick. In my small town, where I'm from. So the kiss of death is to be caught in the Walmart without lipstick, and heaven forbid you go in a Walmart without, McDonald's to get your Big Mac. But anyway, it was a lot of people ahead of us have taught us what the basics were. And so sometimes I think, and I have an 18-year-old son, so I can relate real well. You think you know what good looks is until you put it together, and then someone gives you the feedback. Well, it wasn't quite exactly like that. Yeah. And so many of us had the benefit of people who taught us and spent the time to coach us. And that's actually what our job is. And I find that sometimes you have to meet people where they are and don't assume that everyone actually knows. And this merchandiser, we were working together, and it's obviously he had not been trained in one element that I had, having lived in different markets around the world. And he didn't know what he didn't know. And when I showed him what good looked like, he's like, oh, how cool. Now I get it. Now I see why we do that. And so, again, not to make assumptions and not to judge what people know, but to help paint the story or the picture of what good looks like. And I think if we take the time to do that as leaders, that's actually what we're here to do. We're paid because people before us, when we were in high school and college and getting out of college, they took the time to show us what good looked like. And so I've really stepped back to say, when you look at people coming into the workplace, don't assume that they know everything, and what they think is good might be an idea, but we can also help shape that. And I think as a leader, that's our obligation to do, because that's called developing the next generation of talent. And it's a privilege and it's an honor, but I think it's something that we make assumptions about what people actually know.
Chris, let me come to you, and then Barrett, we'll go to a question.
But it has to come from a place of, I'm invested in your development, right, and I care about your success. And I think that that's one thing that we still need to teach managers, is that you will have a much better chance giving constructive feedback and making it stick and actually change someone's behavior if you start with the premise of, I'm here for your development, I'm here to help you advance, I'm here to help you get to where you want to be. And that's something that's overlooked, because I'm not going to listen to feedback from someone that I think is just there to criticize me. I'm only going to listen if I think we have a larger purpose and we're in it together, and I think that's important to all generations.
It's an interesting shift from evaluative feedback to more development directional feedback, and kind of from backward looking to more forward looking from a mindset shift. Come over here.
Hi, I'm Trey Alverson. I'm from World 50 here in Atlanta. Hi, Sri. I'm a millennial, and I'm listening to the descriptions of millennials. It really kind of centers around entitlement from what I hear, and I think that's fairly accurate. But at the same time, there's a entire subset of us who have fought and served in the post 9/11 wars in America. And I'm just curious to hear how your companies are tapping into this, this pool of veterans that are entering the workforce.
Sure, let me actually have you start with that one.
How do you want to do? Okay. Actually, Brian facilitates. We've done some work together at the Pentagon, and I think there's a recognition. Rich has been a part of this. Kimberly Clark has been a part, Walmart, and there are a consortium of companies that actually have come together working directly with the armed services, because what we're realizing is that there's 60,000 soldiers coming out of active duty on an annual basis and getting lost in the websites and recruiting firms and not knowing exactly where to go and what to do. So Brian and I had the opportunity to meet our equivalent at the Army, at the Pentagon. And so we put together a project team of companies that are actually trying to put companies and people that are looking for jobs together. One particular example we just had, Rich hosted us about a month ago, and the second highest unemployment job in coming out of the Army in particular were drivers. And what was happening is that none of the states across the U.S. were recognizing that driving that they had done in the armed services and transferring that into what we call a CBL. It's a commercial business license. And so we actually went to the White House and we were able to get the legislation changed at the state level. So we're almost at 50 states now. The last time we checked, I think it was 46 states. And now we're hooking up companies like Walmart, like Coca-Cola, like Kimberly-Clark and McDonald's, who actually have the recruiters and the soldiers that put them right together. Now they're certified and they can get jobs real time. And what was happening was there was so much clutter out there. The soldiers didn't know where to go because they're coming out of active combat. The companies were getting frustrated because they didn't know who to actually get to get all this done. So we said, we're going to cut through all that. So this big group of companies has come together to actually hook up the soldiers and the jobs and the companies and the recruiters and just go to town. And we're really starting to see the needle move because we're going right in directly to the top 8 jobs in areas that are the highest of unemployment in the armed services. Number 5 is actually HR, if you can imagine that. They call it personnel. But number 1 is infantry. And you have some people in there that can be trained to do a number of things inside companies. So UPS is a partner company with us, Delta Airlines, Kroger, Safeway. So, I mean, just tons of employers, Home Depot. So we're all coming together. So it's a partnership between many of us to get our active duty soldiers who are coming out of the military viable jobs that they can contribute, and we're doing that expeditiously. Faster than we have before, but it's something that we're all extremely passionate about because these women and men have served our country valiantly and we owe them.
Barrett?
One is from what I'll say is Matthew Delorier. Maybe that's how you pronounce your last name. That's the fancy way. He asks, what are your companies doing to shift the corporate culture and change physical workspaces to reflect what millennials want? And New Urban Roswell adds to that by saying, building on the last session, how are location preferences of Gen Y workers shaping facility location and amenity decisions? So we've talked some about culture, maybe now focusing on physical workspace.
Yeah, Chris?
We've been working on this for a period of time. We've had a flex time policy for 7 or 8 years. We have work to do, and our physical location, we're settled in this small town, Bentonville, Arkansas, and we have 16,000 people there, and it's a town of about 50,000 people, and we have a pretty traditional work environment. And as we remodel it all the time, and if you've ever been there, it's real easy. You just knock the blue covered walls down and put some more up. So we've been working on how can we be more progressive in terms of virtual working, in terms of collaborative workspaces. Our operations actually in the UK is probably the most advanced, and they have a complete boundaryless workspace where the CEO sits right there in the middle of all the associates and colleagues and has a conference room that he uses for meetings. But we are working on it. We know it's a need. We're doing better also in our .com operations that is out in San Bruno, California, but we are beating the drum on this to make changes as we have the opportunities to in our home office.
Rich?
Yeah, one other thing that we're doing right now, just quickly, is just looking at we're out in the suburbs right now, our headquarters, and looking at hoteling locations in the city of Chicago, as a lot of our millennials live in the city itself, and they could just reserve an office for that particular day and be just as effective working there than in our headquarters, and save on the commute time.
There's about 3 or 4 rows behind you there, and then go to that question, then we'll probably have time for one more after that.
Hi. I was here last night, and there was a lot of talk about education, and as probably everybody would agree with me, it's lagging behind and limping and not keeping up with post-industrial era. And my question is, everybody says that education system needs to reform itself, and I do not believe any system can reform itself just because it's called a system. So it has to come from outside. And the big business, not just big, but businesses, the companies, I think they have a very, very crucial role in this reforming the education system. So the hiring process is different, where the companies will take the creative kid, the open-minded kid, the kid who really has a great attitude and a good learning curve, rather than the kid who went to Ivy League college or so. Is there anything different that the business is sending a message to the educational system saying, give me that weird kid who didn't do good in math, but I want them because of this, so that kid who's in the middle school or high school and his child aren't nervous and saying, let me put my talents and creativity on the back burner for now. Let me just go for that college degree. Then I'll decide what is it that I'm good at. So are you guys shifting that priority where the children in our education system are kind of forced in a good way to change themselves because there is no longer demand on what they're producing as students? What is considered by you guys as a priority in these young children, rather than their SAT scores or any other academic measurements, but their own personal talent? Is there anything that you guys are doing to do that? Thank you.
So how are companies coming together with education, the educational system, to perhaps not just work with millennials today, but whatever that next generation is as well, to make that work?
Well, I mean, we found that one of the best, and by the way, I love your question and your statement too about secondary education and not waiting around for the system to get fixed. But I think one of the most important areas that we partner with now are community colleges. They are much more flexible in their curriculum than some of the universities, and we're doing a lot of stuff in we call them our crew rooms in our restaurant, where we have professors actually teach courses, language skill courses like English Under the Arches, in our crew rooms, led by, and it's on company time, and we pay the people for this. And the professors then have access, because some of the toughest things that make people not go to community college or take college courses because they can't get there with some of our employees in our restaurants. So we're trying to bring the courses into it and do things like math skills, make up for some of the shortfalls that have occurred in the secondary system.
I'll add to that something. You hit a hot button. I have a lot of passion, because our chairman said there was a figure out there recently that some crazy statistic of about 300 million people under the age of 30 did not have a job. And it's like, that's not acceptable to me, and it really bothers me. And whether it be 300 million or 200 million, it's not acceptable. So as you look at the kids in either secondary or coming out of college, and Barrett, where are you? I've lost you again. We talk about this a lot. We have an obligation to teach the soft skills. And I don't know that all universities are actually teaching you how to write, teaching you how to communicate, how to collaborate, how to be part of a team, how to write a one-page executive summary that you would present, or a thought. So some of the basics of Business 101. I was on a conference call last Friday with our general manager of India. And in some of our emerging markets, we don't have some of the schools having the talent coming out based on the curriculum. So we're actually going all the way back and partnering with companies to work with the universities in certain curriculum areas. And then we're providing real live internships. He just finished a 3-month internship with about 30 students across some of these universities in India, and then we'll hire probably about half of those. And so we have an obligation to help with the soft skills training, community college or at the university level. But I think the key is pairing up with business to give real life practical experience, so that no matter what you learn in the classroom, you can turn it around and apply it and get feedback, because that's what we're finding how people learn. You have to think, but at the same time you have to do. And if you have one or the other, and whether it be an Ivy League graduate or whether it be someone from a state college, and I will tell you, I don't know where any of my direct reports where they went to undergraduate. I couldn't tell you where they went to school. But the ability to think about something, but the ability to do something with it and make something happen is really essential. And so I think the soft skills training is incredibly important, but in some of the emerging markets around the world, we found that some of the technical training and some of the curriculum, let's say like in supply chain and logistics, they just don't have it or have enough of it. So we're actually going back in all the way to that level, but providing the internship so that they actually can apply the knowledge. And I think if other businesses, you don't have to be a big business, you can be a small business, partner with the community colleges, we can actually start seeing some traction and some differences there because people actually get to say, think, and do. And you put all that together and people are actually going to learn and be very effective when they come into the workplace.
We'll take one last question on Twitter and then we'll probably wrap from there.
Sorry. Okay, so I'm just going to kind of sum up everything else that happened on Twitter because we've only got one here. So we see all these macro trends. We see a transient workforce. We see people who want meaning from their work. We see people who want an urban environment to work in. All of these trends are happening in the workplace. What is the future of talent development, and how, as big companies and small, do we continue to attract and engage the best talent both here at home and throughout our companies?
You know, let me just do a quick lightning round across the panel. If you were to focus on one thing across the next 5 years to help answer the question, what is that one thing that you'd want your company to have accomplished 5 years from now? Kristen, if you don't mind to start
And I said it before, but I would say individualized, customized development plans to get you where you want to go and the way you want to do it.
Yeah. Liz, let me turn to you.
She stole mine, but I'd have to say connecting the brand with the external brand, Kimberly Clark, with the internal brand, with meaning to the employee, which is again customized per person.
I would say accelerating career development. We're going to have a number. We've looked at our demographics. We're going to have a number of boomers that are going to be retiring over the next 5 to 7 years, and we're going to need people ready to take over those jobs.
And everything they said, but doing it through experiential learning. And what we're finding is that putting people in classrooms, they get bored and the attention, the ADD syndrome is out there. So we have found much more success actually identifying business issues and problems that are actually in the business, throwing it to a cross-functional team of people and letting them go at it. And so we are finding that we're building it from the senior levels all the way down to the most entry level because it's teaching people to think differently about how to get the work done. But we're finding it's wonderful, wonderful training because you turn it right around into something that gets implemented into our business and solves a great need. So we're finding traditional classroom training, though it's great for some technical skills, the way that people are learning and accelerating their development and their performance is through experiential learning. And so we're redesigning a lot of the way that we do this around the world quite differently. And it's turning out to be a great way for people to learn.
Good, thank you. I want to wrap us up here a little bit. First, wanted to thank the panel, so Sri, Rich, Liz, and Christian for their insights here. And thank you for everyone in the room for kind of thoughts and questions. Wonderful to make it an interactive discussion as opposed to a presentation in these types of settings. One last housekeeping note. The next session will be in this theater and begins at 2 o'clock around fostering entrepreneurship. So certainly another interesting topic for us to discuss. One last round of applause for the panel. And again, thank you for joining us today. Thank you guys.